All right. I am very happy today because my guest is Derek Toh, the founder of Hiredly. For those of you who don't know, Hiredly is a leading online to offline recruitment platform for junior to mid-management talents, including both a job portal and headhunter recruitment solution. Thank you very much for being here today with me, Derek.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
Excellent. So the question that I ask every single founder, anybody that's listened knows, the first question is about the founding story. So take me back to the beginnings. How did you enter into the entrepreneurial journey, and how did you come about with launching Hiredly?
Yeah, so I never really thought of being an entrepreneur. Basically, I was actually doing headhunting at the time. So I was doing headhunting, and it was for quite a reputable firm. And at the time, there were a lot of my clients that would admit to struggling hiring junior talent, when they advertise on portals, and then they would headhunt, right? Which is great for business as a headhunter. And then one day, I actually went out with a friend, and we had a drink, and he was complaining about the same issue where he would advertise, to hire, and then he wouldn't succeed. And then he would then ask me that, oh, but I can't afford headhunting, like your service. So what's my solution? Like, I'm a small company, and would it make a difference if more people knew about the culture of the company? Because we think we're a good business, we think we're a good culture, and but we don't have this big brand. So if we were to advertise on all these portals, we're going to be alongside these multinational companies and big consumer brands, and they attract all the talent, but I'm a good place to work too. So I was really attracted to this idea of culture, actually, or more specifically, using culture to attract talent. So I loved the idea. And 2 weeks later, after that drink, I quit my job, and I said, I'm going to build this thing here. And I think Malaysians are going to love it. So I actually started, I approached it like an artist, not as an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. In a sense where I had no clue how to implement or execute it. I have no clue how to make money out of it. All I knew was I had this instinct that the market would love something like this, right? Using culture to attract talent, and from the talent's point of view, finding the company with the right culture for you. And that sort of launched our early version of the platform. So we were called WOB last time, WOBD, which is actually short for Working on Beanbags. That was the name of the blog. Right? And we arrived at that name because I was walking around these companies that say they want to use culture to attract talent, and I found that the one thing they all have in common was they all have beanbags. So I was like, okay, I guess that's the name of the blog. So we got lucky in some sense. So we launched it, and it caught that spark kind of caught on a little bit, and then it grew, and it grew to what we have become today. So I often tell people that I really started this with the intention of bringing culture to the workplace, and somehow it's just grew into this really big recruitment company.
Okay. So when you did, I mean, it's a quick jump in order to quit your job after kind of brainstorming on the idea and then jumping and running with it. But when you started getting it off the ground, because you were in headhunting to begin with, did you start with the offline portion of it, or did you kind of start with the online? Which came first in this journey?
Yeah, definitely online. In fact, I wasn't even thinking of it as an offline business in the beginning. Okay. And I can share more about the story, how we became online to offline. But it was purely online because I remember when I first sort of quit my job to start this blog or platform, that I had a couple of contacts of friends who knew that I was very good at headhunting. Mm-hmm. And then they said, let's start a recruitment or headhunting firm together. Like, I'll invest in you. And then, I'm sure you do a great job, you can make lots of money. And my response to them at the time was like, oh, but how many people can we help in a headhunting firm? I was a very good consultant in my day, and I would be, in a year, I would be able to help, say, 30 or 40 people get hired. So then 30, 40 people a year is very good, but there are like 5 million people in Malaysia in the workforce. So how many Dereks will you need? So my point was that offline was good, but the impact was limited.
Mm-hmm.
So from the get-go, I was like, no, I think the impact is limited. So I prefer online because the reach is much further.
Mm-hmm.
We can impact more people. So it's always the original idea was definitely online.
Okay. And bringing that sort of emphasis on company culture and that, how do you bring that online? Because it seems like it would be more complicated than your traditional job board. Yeah.
Yes. So the typical job board would just be focused on job descriptions. And most of it will be that's text-based job description. So
Sure.
if you were to, you can run this experiment now. You can go to any portal and you search for marketing executive.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at those job descriptions side by side, most of the time you can't really tell the difference. So
undifferentiated content.
yes, so it's all the same, and you can't tell which is the right company. So you end up blindly applying to different roles and different companies. And on the flip side, on the employer side, that's why sometimes they get a lot of spam. But it's also partially the way they advertise. So for us, it's like, okay, we decided we want to move away from this kind of like text-based CVs or JDs, right? And try to bring in a more a richer element to it, right? So a more human element or more information, and we call this concept going beyond the CV or beyond the JD. And so when we first started building the platform, so the friend I mentioned that had this drink with me, I actually told him I'm going to do it, and they said, great. So how are we going to do it? And I actually reversed that question to him. I said, I don't know. How do you think I'm going to do it? And he said, I have a DSLR camera in my office. So I said, why don't you come to my office? I'm going to lend the camera to you. I'm going to set it up for you. And then why don't we start taking some photos and you interview me? Literally, that was like, okay, let's see what happens. So I remember the first interview that I did was, I don't know, like 20 minutes long or something like this, like ridiculously long for the purpose that we wanted to have. And I interviewed it. I just took that really long interview back home to my computer and started editing it myself to try to shorten it. And then we said, okay, maybe that's the difference. So if a job seeker, before they apply to a job, they can get a sense of who the founder is, who the management is, what are they like, what do they care about, what's the vision for the company. And we took a lot of photos of the office. If they can get a sense of what the work environment is like before they even set foot for an interview, that would save them so much time. Because that's what happens most of the time. When someone applies blindly to a job, the only time they get to really decide if they like this job or not is when they get invited to the interview. So when they turn up for an interview, they look around and they're like, you know what, I don't like this place. But by then you've sort of invested so much time in the process already. Yeah. So we said, why don't we just shortcut this by bringing in a lot of information in a very visual way? So that's how the original concept was. But of course, it's evolved into different elements now. But the main pillar around this idea is going beyond the CV and JD, right? That's what we're trying to do right now.
Okay, so you would actually end up getting photos, videos, more profile information around the employer to give more information to the applicant. Would it, as after that first instance of the friend that you brainstormed the idea with, is it typically the employer that ends up having to create that, send it to you, or do you have people that will come and facilitate creating that content layer, the extra richness of details?
Yeah, in the beginning it was me and my wedding photographer. Believe it or not, that this is true story. So after I shot that first profile with my friend, I then started going around talking to different people and said, does this seem interesting to you? Would you like to be listed on this platform? Yeah. And then when they said yes, what I did, and more said yes, I said, okay, I need someone that can shoot this video because I can't do it. So I just rang up my wedding photographer, which I really like, and say, hey, look, I'm starting a new company. I don't have a lot of money. how much would it cost for you to turn up here, shoot this video, but I don't need you to edit it. Just give me the file and I'll do the editing. I just need you to turn up and shoot the video. So they gave me a very reasonable price, which I then just recharged to the employer. So since the beginning, we've always charged the employer. So it's never free to use. But so the company never made a profit. It was just paid back to these freelancers. But I was heavily involved in creating content. And I remember what I did was, say if we shot a video at, and it ended at 4 or 5 in the evening, I would go back to my house and I would spend the entire night editing this video, sometimes to like 3 or 4 in the morning, because I was so committed to have the page out the next day. Right. So I was so into it. And then when it came up, and obviously the first of all, I love this. I just interviewed yesterday and tomorrow my page is built. Right. So it's amazing. So I was super hands-on at the beginning. But today, as on Hiredly today, we have a combination of the employee can upload their own media, or they can still use our sort of professional team, right, to do it for them. So we have 2 options.
Yeah, I mean, there's a component kind of like the Airbnb origination, where they realized that, hey, people weren't taking good photos of their places. It's not very appealing. So they sent out professionals. Over time, the people that were on the platform got savvier and were like, okay, if we're going to attract people, we need to put better photos. You see a same out of the employers now that you've been operating for a while. People are familiar with the way that the platform runs. They're sending in better stuff these days on their own, I would imagine.
Well, it depends. So if we're talking to a big corporate company, sometimes they've really got all these digital assets that are there, right? And then they would be able to upload it. Most of the time, I find most HR people want to do it. Like, they love the idea, but their marketing department is very busy marketing the business, right? So they see this employer branding thing, or using marketing time to attract talent, as not really marketing's main thing. So HR teams like the idea, but they need help. So what they do is then, they actually pay us, because they look, actually we could do it ourselves, but our marketing feels it's more important to focus on their business marketing. So then they pay us, because we are like experts in doing employer branding, to do it for them. So it saves them that time.
Okay, so let's take the opposite side of this and talk about those prospective job seekers. What additional layers do you end up putting on in order to provide the employers with more details on them themselves? Because if you're going beyond the JD, you also said you're going beyond the CV. So what is that beyond?
Yeah, so we experimented with a few things, and some of them has stuck around. So the one thing that we experimented with was also video for the job seeker. So when a job seeker signs up, they're actually given like a 30-second space to upload a video cover letter. And that feature is still there. But what I find is that in general, most job seekers are not that. For some reason, they don't do it. Most people still don't do it, even though that option's kind of there. But the one thing that really works for us is having a chatbot interviewer. So right now, so if an employee was to advertise a role, they can actually set up our chatbot, which we call Ashley, to sort of ask some questions that they care about. So every time a job seeker applies to a role, I mean, not only does the employer get their CV, they also get their answers to the chatbot, right? Sort of side by side. So these are typically information that they wouldn't already find on the CV. Like, why are you interested to apply to this role? As an example, right? So that helps give like a richer layer of information for the employer. But we are working on other things like that. Like the offline element is one part that we're experimenting with. But as we launch more stuff, like kind of.
So let's talk about that layer then, because you referenced that there was a story behind the move to the offline. What was that story? Because digital business, what's the impetus? What's the motivation to do the offline side?
Yeah, so when we first started doing the offline side, it was purely as an additional way to generate revenue, because there were some employers that said, look, I love the talent that you're bringing. I don't have the time to screen the CVs, if I run an ad. So can you headhunt for us within your database?
Okay.
And then we saw, oh, okay, let's build a little headhunting team here. I wasn't really paying much attention to it. It's like just for employers that ask for this service, at least we have a team there. And then one day, when I was looking at their work, like what the headhunters are doing, because they access the database directly in a very raw way, I saw the amount of data that they were looking at when they were actually sourcing for a candidate. Like, it was so much more data than I had when I was doing headhunting. Because now I know, not only do I know this candidate CV, I know what kind of jobs they're interested in, because I know what they applied to, what they rejected. And I know what how they're responding to employers, and so that information I thought was so powerful. And it really shortcut that process of like sourcing. That I said, hey, we can scale this. So my original objection about building an offline business was it's not scalable. The impact was very limited. And I said, if we can really use technology, I don't like using the term AI too much, but I know it's a bit overused, but if you can really, yes, but if you can really automate how we process this information for the headhunter, we have an efficiency advantage over a conventional headhunting company. And me, Derek, the consultant, when I was helping 30, 40 people a year, I can now have a consultant maybe help 100 people a year get a job, and that would make a big difference. So we started taking it seriously, and we said, let's build this layer here, because on the online side, because we're so focused on culture, I do find that it did hit a certain limit as to the type of companies that would like this concept, right, as an idea. So if our goal is to help as many people get hired in the right company as possible, we needed another way to do it. And so we decided to do this, the offline method.
Okay. Interesting. But let's transition back to the beginning and see how you've progressed. So let's go back to those early days when you're first getting on your initial clients, and because of the way this is essentially kind of two-sided marketplace. You've got employers seeking looking to recruit. You have job seekers. So when you're out there in the initial days, bringing on too many employers without a pool of candidates can end up being off-putting because you've got unfilled postings. The same thing can go on the job seeker side. If there's not enough jobs in those initial days, can you walk me through a little bit of how you were able to go through and build out and manage that balance in the early days?
Yes, and that is the most common challenge of a two-sided marketplace, right? It's like a chicken and egg problem. So we were quite lucky on the employer side, because when I first met many of these employers, and this was before the first blog or website was built, I actually walked around with a PDF of what the blog or the platform would look like. And I said to employers, I said, look, the whole concept is about culture. That's our why we exist. Do you like this idea or you don't like this idea? That's it. So we never used any numbers. We never said like we have 10,000 candidates or 50,000 candidates. It was an irrelevant thing. The most important thing was, do you buy into this idea of why we exist, which is to use culture to attract talent? We have no users now. We have no employers now. But if you love this idea, come and list. So many of them did. We launched with 10 employers, and then it grew to 50 in like 2 or 3 months. It was really fast, right? And they were very patient in terms of the expectations of the talent, because they just bought into the whole concept of culture, right? And then once the platform launched, the media started picking up on it, and then we got a lot of free marketing, and then the users started coming in. So in some sense, we actually filled up the supply side first, the employer side first. But because they bought into the story so deeply that they were very patient in waiting for the demand side to come in, or whichever you call supply or demand, right? So the candidates to come in. And then once we got to 50, there were enough jobs to build momentum, right? And then so the candidates started coming in, etc. And then the employers then also followed suit. If you ask me today, I actually think that we the employers, the demand from employers is probably too high right now. There's so much demand for the type of talent that we have, that we have so many ads run on the platform, and the talent base needs to catch up, right? So we've actually have the opposite problem now, but that's kind of how we started.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I imagine that there is a universal crunch on talent. You know, you hear it from basically every single employer. So I guess there's some level of expectation there. And if they're already experiencing the pain point and they buy into the concept of the culture, it seems like you had something that was ready made and had some levels of built-in patience in order to tolerate those initial days of scaling.
Yes, because it was never about, oh, we are a better portal or we're a better platform, come users, you're going to get X amount of applicants. We never sold it like that. And that's how a lot of portals sell themselves now. You know, but for us, it was a very clear concept, right? Because I was approaching it like an artist, literally like, do you love this idea? Yes, then list your company. That's it. Like no question. Like don't ask me about the talent database because it doesn't exist. Right. So yeah, so we had enough of those people who really believed in it, you know, and they were. I actually think in some sense that's how we got from 10 to 50 employees so quickly, because the first 10 believed in it so much they actually acted as advocates, right, for this idea, and then it brought in all these other employers to the platform. So I mean, I didn't have time to do any sales. Most of the people that came in were just referrals, like one employee referred the next and the next and the next, and we got to 50 really fast.
Did you incentivize the referrals at all, or it was basically just word of mouth that kind of went viral to an extent?
Yes, it was purely word of mouth.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, very cool. Is there any sort of concentration of the types of jobs that are most frequent through your platform? Do you see any sort of clustering? You referenced in one of your examples, you referenced marketing, for example. Do you see it in any sort of departmental sort of clustering, or what is the most popular out there these days?
Well, we are used a lot for actually employers advertise across the board, but the ones that are most active are sales and marketing, tech, as you can imagine, like software developers, and creative talent, right? Actually, many companies love to hire creative talent through us. I have a feeling because we're such a visual platform that we naturally attract a lot of creative people, and even operational roles, right? Like accountants and HR, we have those. But the one common thread or pattern I find with employers that use us is they tend to be either digital companies or companies that are trying to be digital, you know, or companies where their the success of their business relies heavily on their talent. Like for example, service-based industries or professional services, right? So or like financial services where the talent basically create the product, right? So so those kind of industries tend to use us very well.
Okay. And within the customers that you serve, do you see a lot of recurring customers? Are many of them coming back on a fairly frequent basis in order to seek out new employees, or maybe even you might be able to have some visibility into churn that those employers may have, and that might play a role into how you promote them?
Yeah, so you know, in the early days, most employers sort of self-screen themselves. I mean, as they go to the platform and they'll know if they're suitable to advertise on this platform or not, right? Because it's such a visual place. And I would actually say that all those early employers, most of them have stuck around until today, because that concept still resonates with them.
Mm-hmm.
So with the exception that those that were affected by COVID, I mean, very, very unfortunately, we actually lost a lot of clients, not because they didn't want to advertise with us, but because they stopped existing, because there were struggles with the economy and stuff. But now we're actually transitioning more into the corporate world, which is like the main market, right? So every startup, I find that typically your first client base are other startups, because startups tend to, not only do they want to support each other, but they are generally very open-minded to try new things. So early clients are other startups typically, but we've actually gone into the main market now. Like we have lots of like we've got big reputable banks that use us, big media companies that use us. So for those companies, so far, fingers crossed, retention rate is still there, still pretty high. But I mean, I won't go into exact numbers, but it's definitely more than half, right, that stay every year. Yeah.
Okay. So looking forward, what's next for Hiredly? What's in either the product roadmap or the expansion plan, to the extent that you're able to discuss? What's next?
Well, we are really going strong on the online to offline concept, right? And the online to offline concept basically means that we want to integrate the offline world into the online world. So we're going to have a lot of community-driven kind of events and work that exists in the offline world, and then try to bring that data into the online platform. So we have a very full, full rich data of our candidates or our users. Right. So it's very easy to capture information of user online, but it's very difficult to do offline. So that's the space that we are going into. So we're going to have a lot of community-driven events where people will come and they will have a Hiredly account. And when they come with a Hiredly account, we actually sort of record what their activities are in these events or which events they're in. So when our headhunters start trying to look for the right jobs for them, or when we are matching them to jobs on the portal, it will actually take account of everything that's happening offline as well in trying to match these people. So it's an interesting concept. I don't think any platform or recruitment business is trying this right now, but it's what gets us, excited at the moment.
Sure. In respect to the layer on culture and getting visibility into what an office looks like, in the post-pandemic period, there's a lot of conversation around remote work, hybrid work. Is it back to the office? How do you see the impact from your viewpoint with the employers that you work for, and how that actually impacts some of the hiring decisions? Are people looking from a work from home hybrid scenario more frequent?
Yeah, we run our work culture surveys every year. So the most recent one is a special edition, very much focused on hybrid. And something interesting came up from the data is that if you were someone that you were physically asked to come into the office, right? Most of these people said they preferred hybrid, right? They wanted hybrid. So, which is okay, that makes sense. But what was interesting was if you were fully remote, if you're working fully remote, most of the people who work fully remote also wanted hybrid. So that was interesting, because you would think that someone that didn't have to go to the office would say, that's great, I like it this way, I don't want to go to the office. But most people want an office to go to, right? If they wanted to go to an office. So I think when a lot of people say they want hybrid, I think it's not so much that they want remote working. I believe the whole idea is people want options. They want to be able to choose if I work at home or I work in the office. I want some empowerment here. But at the same time, no one really wants to work in a company where there's no office to go to. So it's still going to be something that's very important for every company, building this the workspace that is very collaborative, because I think that's why people still want to go, right? They want this connection to their colleagues. So it won't really go away, in my opinion, even though it's going in that direction.
Yeah, it's very difficult to build a company culture when you don't have some sort of in-person interaction. I mean, you can get to a certain extent via your Zoom calls, etc. But it's very challenging. I mean, I've heard a number of folks reference attrition rates and so forth that have been happening in companies that are fully remote. And I think a lot of people are kind of struggling of what does the balance look like between the flexibility, desire to get the culture, because both of those affect productivity rates, and productivity is basically what the lifeblood of the organization. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. So I guess my guess is most people are going to start going back to the office.
Mm.
But companies are always going to always have the option of working remotely, although it's not going to be as prominent as most people first guessed when COVID first started. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure plenty of people would be happy to spend 1 or 2 days less time in the traffic congestion during during the commuting hours. So a little bit of flexibility is perfectly fine. One other question in regards to looking forward and what's in the plans for you. Recruitment is a pretty localized business, because oftentimes you're talking about a physical office, a physical location, proximity to that. How do you view long-term expansion? Because I'm gonna venture a guess and say that the large amounts of your activity is in the Klang Valley, where Malaysia is kind of Klang Valley centric. How do you view expansion, whether on a regional basis within the country, or perhaps even broader ambitions of replicating the model elsewhere?
Yeah. So I think if we were purely an online business, then I guess scaling can be a lot faster, but the experience would be very different. As an
Mm.
example, like LinkedIn is a global platform,
Mhm.
and they barely have a physical presence, but they're everywhere. So, but of course, what happens is in a purely online setting, that there's a certain limitation, right? So our whole idea was, by being engaged offline, we really get to know people, when we talk to them about which companies they really want to work in, and not just look at them as like a piece of paper, which is the CV or the JD. And the this whole concept, I guess, therefore presents some challenges, right, when we are scaling, which we have accepted. So
Mhm.
we are very clear on what makes us unique, and because of that, we currently have a Malaysia first approach. So we do have some plans to go regional, but when we go regional, we experimented going to Philippines at some point, and we realized that it was very difficult if you're not going full on, and you
Mhm.
sort of like half-heartedly trying to go to a new country. You just waste money.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we say focus on Malaysia. We're gonna we actually have people in working in Penang, for example, which
Mhm.
is like north of Malaysia now. There's no office, but we have employees there, right?
Okay.
So, and we also have employees in, let's say, in Johor. So we still, yeah, so we have to be physically present in those areas, but we've accepted that this is our strategy, and we actually run in a very capital efficient way. So I consider ourselves profitable, meaning that if we stopped developing new features and just run as we are, we're actually a profitable business right now. So this is a good balance, I think, for balancing scaling and profitability at the same time.
Okay. Okay. So when you put a definition towards what success means for the organization, what is that criteria? How do you define success as an organization?
Yeah, so we're very mission orientated. So our mission is to help people get hired in the right jobs and the right companies, and then we track the number of people that get hired. Right, we try as best as possible to track that. On the online side, it's a bit difficult because it's advert based,
Mhm.
right? But the offline side is pretty easy. And then we have three main pillars that support the mission. So the first one is financial independence. So what this means is that we've always, from day one, we made the decision that we are a commercial business. So we're not going to burn money just for scale, to scale fast, right? We have to be very profit minded, and not rely on investors. That means we can be self-sustaining. So
Mhm.
financial independence is one metric that we track, right? Revenue and profit. The second one is job seeker experience. So for us, the winner of the recruitment game is the platform that job seekers prefer to use first. So if job seekers prefer to use us first, we will win. The employers will come, right? So that is the second thing that we track. So we track things like Net Promoter Score. We don't really track job seeker user retention because in job search, it's not. I don't want you to be looking for a job every 3 months, let's say.
Sure.
I want you to find that job you love, and I want you to stay there, right? And in fact, if you stayed in that job for like 3 or 4 years, that's a great success story for us. So user retention is not a metric we track very closely, but we look at NPS. So that's what we look at. And then the third one is market share growth. So we track growth in database, growth in active users. Do more users are more employers using us? Are there more advertisers? So we track those numbers just to make sure that we are capturing a larger and larger market share. So those three pillars: financial independence, job seeker experience, and market share growth, sort of form the foundation of our mission.
Okay. Is it fair to say that the revenue model on the two sides is you have the advertising, which is essentially like a posting fee, and then the offline is probably a little bit more like the recruitment, where it's either related to the salary amount, some sort of fixed fee. Is it fair to say that's kind of how it plays out?
Yes. So the offline side is more success basis, and the online side is advertising. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Very cool. Some really interesting insights coming out of that. Let me transition and wrap things up with my typical closing questions that I ask everyone. So the first one is, what is the tech tool that you just can't live without?
I have a boring answer for this one, and it's note-taking tools. Okay. I can't live without note-taking tools. So I use it very extensively. Whenever I have a thought, I want to capture it. I use note-taking tools, and there's two that I use in particular. One is called Bear. It's a bit less popular. So Bear is like iOS/Mac, Mac only note-taking tool. And I use
spelled
it
like the animal, or
spelled like the animal.
Okay.
That's right. And the reason I use that is because it's really fast.
Okay.
Really fast. Like, so every time I have an book, it's up. I can find the note really quick, and it syncs across devices really fast. And so I use Bear to do a lot of writing and note taking. So amazingly fast. I mean, I used to use Evernote, and I stopped using because it got a bit clunky. And the other one I use is Notability, which is a more common one for when I'm doing handwritten notes. So I walk around with my iPad mini. I have it here, like it's always beside me, and it's got this pen, and I love writing and thinking. So Bear and Notability on my iPad, I can't live without those two.
Okay, perfect. Second question is, if you were to talk to another startup founder that's just getting going, what would be the biggest piece of advice that you would be able to offer?
Don't walk around like you're Elon Musk or Steve Jobs, I think.
a bit of humility in the early days.
I mean, we have these. I made this mistake too, right? So we have this like model kind of CEOs or founders that a lot of tech people look up to, and then it's a mistake to think that you can be exactly like them, right? So I've had so many instances where I was very torn between what Elon Musk or Steve Jobs would do versus what Derek would naturally want to do. And then what I did was, like, I actually went through a lot of soul searching is a very big word, but I went through this process where I tried to define my own values as a person. What do I care about? What do I value, right? What does the company value? And then think about, through the lens of my personal values and company values, what does a CEO look like or a founder look like through those values, and become the best version of that, right? Rather than trying to be an Elon Musk, because you're not an Elon Musk. So I think that's the main advice. And the other thing is to kind of surround yourself, I think, a lot with great mentors and advisors. It's very important, and really high quality peers, especially if you're a first time founder. Whatever you think you know, you don't know. And when you encounter this huge problem and you think that, oh, it's such a big thing, you realize that most founders have gone through it before. So if you're surrounded by great people, then they can help you, right? And stuff like that you can't find in books. So you really need to talk to people a lot.
Yeah. No, I think that's fantastic. The aspect of don't replicate what other founders are, even if they're the top in the news. Do what's suitable for you, as well as surround yourself with others, and leverage the strength of community knowledge in order to be able to understand the challenges that you're facing. It may not necessarily be wholly unique, even if they seem insurmountable at the time. This was fantastic, Derek. Lots of great insight has come out of this. I just want to give you a big thank you for coming out and joining me here.
Yes, thanks for inviting me, Kevin. And I look forward to listening to the episode.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right, that wraps it up for another fantastic episode of the Sea of Startups. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. Go onto iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review. It's the best way for us to get discovered and to have these startup stories reach a broader audience. If you have any suggestions or would like to get in touch, you can email me at kevin@indelible.vc. As always, I'm your host, Kevin Brocklin from Indelible Ventures, and this is the Sea of Startups.